Welcome everyone to this episode of Arcade USA Bits and Bytes. We're talking with Reger. He's a up-and-coming little game programmer. He has some pretty cool things he's been working on. So, Reger, how you been doing?
Been doing pretty good. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. First off, what got you interested in programming?
It started when I was really little. When I was little, I got this program called Game Maker, and at first I just kind of screwed around with it. I've always been a computer person. So I would just screw around with this little program and do what I could, and it just kind of sprouted from there. The program was really good for beginners. And of course, talking about like an 8-year-old trying to do programming, typically wouldn't go very well, but the program worked in my favor.
What kind of games did you make with Game Maker?
They were horrible. I found a couple of old versions of them on my old desktop hard drive, and they're awful. There was one where you played, it was like the Hulk or something, and the sprite is horrible. It's like a green smiley face with black scribbles on the top, and you can move around and collect these little burgers while this weird red-looking thing is chasing you. It's like it can never catch you because you both move at the same speed. So as long as you're always moving, you're never gonna get caught. So there was simple stuff, but it was a good learning curve, and it was a good thing. Game Maker is a great program if you're looking into learning programming, and it was fun. It was fun.
So what inspired you to recreate some of these classic arcade games?
It was always seeing what other people did. When you see what other people have done to make games, and also curiosity, seeing what somebody else does and trying to figure out how they did it. When the creators of Pac-Man made Pac-Man, and you see the little character moving around, or in asteroids, you see the asteroids moving around and your ship moving, and trying to figure out how all that works. How can I do that same thing? And then kind of problem solving and going from there. It's always seeing what other people did. In fact, I don't say this very often, but when I made my games, I started off with the first remake of Pac-Man back in 2014. The first one was just kind of screwing around, but when I made the second one, it was because when I looked around and saw what other people made with Game Maker, and this isn't meant to be taken an insult in any way, shape, or form to anybody, but when I saw it, they weren't necessarily very accurate. It was very obvious that it was Pac-Man, but I always had that little segment of my brain that was like, how could I make it accurate? What could I do to make it look like the arcade version? And I just kind of went from there and took what I knew about other people's games and built onto it, and it just kind of sprouted up from there.
Oh, wow. That's pretty awesome. Is there a particular classic arcade game that is your favorite?
My favorite has to be Pac-Man.
Oh,
There's a
yeah.
lot of other games that I love playing, like Galaga. In fact, I'm really good at Galaga. I can get 90,000 score. I think my high score I've got one of those little Namco 12-in-1 plug-and-play things. I
Oh,
forget what they're
yeah.
called.
Yes.
And that, I have a blast just sitting around on the TV playing on that. I love Galaga a lot more. Pac-Man's got to be my favorite. I'm off track again. I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, those are two of my favorite as well. I remember when Pac-Man was first released back in 1980. It was a very popular game. It definitely munched a lot of quarters at my local arcade.
Yes, sir.
What are some of the challenges you've had in trying to recreate some of these classic games?
So it's a little bit weird with this one because when you look at making a game, it's always the big things that catch your eye first. Let's say you're making Centipede. Okay, so for Centipede, you've got this alien that's going to be coming down from the top. You've got mushrooms that are going to block it. Whenever the alien hits it, it turns and goes in the other direction. So the first thing that my mind would think of is getting the player to move around and shoot, and then getting that thing to move across from the top. But in reality, when you're making a game like that, at least for me, the things that always tend to catch me are the smaller stuff. Like with Centipede, something that I could expect to be caught up on is making sure that the mushrooms have stages. You shoot it once, it's damaged a little. You shoot it again, it's a little bit more
Oh
damaged.
yeah.
You know, it's that way it doesn't just completely disappear. Like with Pac-Man. Pac-Man is a perfect example of that because when I first started it, I was worried about the ghosts. I was worried about the intermissions, all this other stuff. And what I'm caught on right now is you've got the eyeballs. Whenever you eat one of the ghosts, it turns into the eyeballs. The eyeballs make their way back to the box. And when they're going back to the box, they've got this kind of sound, this little score sound effect going on. And in my recreation, it turns out that the biggest trouble I've had so far is getting that sound to keep playing when there are multiple eyes going back to the box. So you get this thing where you eat two in a row, one of the eyes will return to the box, and then the sound will completely stop. And then the other eyeballs will go back to the box, and then the sound will keep going. So there'll be this silence for a good 3 or 4 seconds as the other set of eyes are returning to the box. And I still haven't figured out a way to fix that. So hopefully I can get that figured out.
Well, that's part of the challenge. When you do get it, when you do get it resolved, it'll give you a sense of accomplishment.
Yes, sir.
Are there other classic arcade games you'd like to try to recreate?
So I've been experimenting around with Tempest. Tempest, it's a great game. I honestly haven't played it a lot. It's the concept and the idea that's gotten me interested in making this one. The idea of this ship moving around on the plane and it looking through the vector graphics. It's really cool. So I've been trying to figure out a way of linking up sprites with values. You tap the left or the right, and it'll add a value or take away a value, and each value will be associated with a sprite. So let's say 0, which is what you'd start on, would be the center of the screen, and then 1 would be on the right-hand face of the left block to the left of the starting point, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah.
So as you tap the button, it would add a value, and it would slowly move your ship across the plane. Another one I've been experimenting around with is Mr. Do, because I've already started around on Dig Dug, and
Oh.
I've already got a bit working on Dig Dug, and I've been experimenting with ways to make the ball bounce around through the place and then return to the player. I haven't gotten much. I've got a little, essentially just a reskinned Dig Dug with a ball. That's about all I've got so far. But hopefully it'll amount to something.
Oh, that's pretty cool. What was your first classic arcade game that you remember playing?
So I can't remember the exact one that I did. It was a long time ago. It must have been when I was like 3 or 4. Unfortunately, I don't have that good of a memory. But the first one that I can remember was when I was in the 5th grade, and I can't remember exactly what it was. It was maybe it was for attendance, or maybe our class had the best attendance or something. I don't remember. We used to have this thing called AR, which is where you would read a book and then you would turn it in and get points for reading the book, and you'd take a test,
Huh.
and the class that got the highest amount of points would get a party or something. And anyways, the we had a party where we went out to our local skating rink, and I'm not a very fit person. I don't do a lot of running around and skating, and I'm not big into sports.
Nope,
I
neither am
used to
I.
say that I was into basketball and stuff, and no, the truth was I wasn't. I could spend hours and hours on a computer. So naturally, when we get to the skating rink, we take out the shoes and everything, and they hand me a pair of skating rinks, and what do I do with these? What do I do with these? So I just kind of set them by the barrier and went off to the arcade. Um, and the first one that caught my eye was a class of 1981 Ms. Pac-Man Galaga collaboration cabinet.
Oh yeah.
And that one is the one. Whenever anybody mentions arcade, that's what pops into my mind is that one, because that was the main cabinet that got me into it all. I think it
Yes.
also kind of helps of just my parents. My parents used to talk about Pac-Man when I was little.
Oh yeah. That's a good combo too. Galaga and Miss Pac-Man in one machine.
Oh yeah.
So two of my favorites right there. Is programming something you would want to do as a career?
I've considered it. It's definitely something that I really enjoy. I don't know that it's something that I'd be looking in as a career. Um, like I'm knowledgeable in that factor, at least a little bit, I would hope. Um, and I've had people who would come to me and ask about that kind of stuff, and like I can give them advice and that sort of thing, which I guess that shows at least some intelligence in here, somewhere in my brain. But I don't know that that's enough for me to want to do it full time. I think I've been looking more into the robotic spectrum.
Awesome.
I would always buy these little robots, little BB-8s and R2s. I've got some on my profile and stuff if you
Yep,
want to
I've seen them.
take a look afterwards. And I would always take them apart, and unlike most people, I would actually be able to get the thing back together and not screw it up, which that's always a huge accomplishment when you take apart this $100 robot and then you put it back together and it doesn't break.
I'm sure your parents appreciate that too.
I hope so.
That's pretty awesome. Are you eventually thinking about maybe trying to code your own game into a release?
I actually have started a couple. On top of the homebrew ROMs I've been doing, I've got a horror game in development, and I don't know, honestly, like I can't even say that this is going to be made. Yeah, I don't even know if this is going to be made public because I'm still experimenting around with things. Like I can't guarantee that this will even be published, but I'm trying really hard to make it into something that people can enjoy. Essentially, it's a horror game that's 8-bit or 16-bit. I haven't really. I'm just making sprites and seeing where that takes me. I haven't. It's not emulation or anything. It's just kind of designed to look like it. But the whole concept of this is a horror game that's designed around an arcade game that can still send chills down your spine,
Oh wow.
if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, that makes perfect
There's
sense. Yeah.
So there's that one, and then there's one other. And now I actually talked to another guy on Facebook. I'm so sorry. I forgot his name. But if he's watching, he should know who he is when I start going into description on this. I have it written here somewhere. And we were talking back and forth in messages, and the game is called Pac-Man Power Up. And essentially, it's a game like Pac-Man, but there are certain power-ups you can get. Like, for example, maybe you eat one of them, and then the Galaga ship goes across the bottom and starts shooting upwards.
Oh
And if it
wow.
hits a ghost, then it turns into the eyes and it goes back to the box. I've already written out a couple concepts for it. We've talked back and forth a little bit on concepts and ideas. So again, I don't know. I've been playing around with the idea of it and toying around with it. So we'll see where it goes from there. It's
Oh,
an
that's
exciting
awesome.
concept, though.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think one of the early PC games that really spooked me the most. There was one. I can't remember the name of the company that made it, but it was called Alone in the Dark, and it was a very creepy. It had kind of like 8-bit graphics kind of style to it, and it was a
Hmm.
very creepy game. I don't know if you ever played that or not, but it was pretty
I
creepy.
don't think I have.
Yeah, check out a video on it. It's called Alone in the Dark. It's kind of like a action adventure game where you got to go through this haunted house and some haunted underground and the gardens, and you got things you got to solve. You got ghosts that pop out of nowhere and critters. It'll get you. It's got a lot of jump scares in it.
Oh,
Yeah,
I do like jump scares.
you may want to check it out. It's actually a really cool game. They made some sequels to it as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Is there any place that people can go to follow along with your projects and see what you're up to?
I have my Facebook account, but the biggest way for people to keep in touch with what I'm doing is my Discord information. And whenever I'm working on something new, I'll post it there. So, you know, eh, I've never been real big about posting it everywhere, so I don't advertise typically. So I'm sorry if I'm a
Yeah.
little awkward on this subject.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So we'll get a link to your Discord server, and people can follow along with your projects, especially your little horror game that you're working on.
Yes, sir.
Be pretty cool. Well, thanks for participating in the Arcade USA Bits and Bytes. Had a good
Yes,
time
sir.
talking
Thank you
to
for
you,
having
Reger.
me.
And until next time, everyone, thanks for watching. If you'd like to be featured on an Arcade USA Bits and Bytes segment, send an email over to arcadeusa76@gmail.com or come to the Arcade USA Bits and Bytes Facebook page. Either way, come on over, have some fun. Until next time, everyone, keep on retro gaming.